Joseph Conrad, born Joseph Theodor Conrad Korzeniowski, 3rd of December 1857 to the 3rd of August 1924, was a Polish-British novelist and story writer. He is regarded as one of the greatest writers in the English language, and although he did not speak English fluently until his 20s, he became a master prose stylist who brought a non-English sensibility into English literature. He wrote novels and stories, many in nautical settings that depict crises of human individuality in the midst of what he saw as an indifferent, inscrutable, and amoral world. Conrad is considered a literary impressionist by some and an early modernist by others, though his works also contain elements of 19th century realism. His narrative style and anti-heroic characters, as in Lord Jim, for example, have influenced numerous authors. Many dramatic films have been adapted from and inspired by his works. Numerous writers and critics have commented that his fictional works, written largely in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, seem to have anticipated later world events. Writing near the peak of the British Empire, Conrad drew on the national experiences of his native Poland during nearly all his life, parcelled out among 3 occupying empires, and on his own experiences in the French and British merchant navies, to create short stories and novels that reflect aspects of a European-dominated world, including imperialism and colonialism, and that profoundly explore the human psyche. The mind of man is capable of anything, because everything is in it, all the past as well as the future. Heart of Darkness is an 1899 novella by Joseph Conrad, in which the sailor Charles Marlowe tells his listeners the story of his assignment as steamer captain for a Belgian company in the African interior. The novel is widely regarded as a critique of European colonial rule in Africa, whilst also examining the themes of power dynamics and morality. Although Conrad does not name the river on which most of the narrative takes place, at the time of writing the Congo Free State, the location of the large and economically important Congo River was a private colony of Belgium's King Leopold II. The offing was barred by a black bank of clouds, and the tranquil waterway leading to the uttermost ends of the earth flowed sombre under an overcast sky, seemed to lead into the heart of an immense darkness. Marlowe is given a text by Kurtz, an ivory trader working on a trading station far up the river, who has gone native and is the object of Marlowe's expedition. Central to Conrad's work is the idea that there is little difference between civilized people and savages. Heart of Darkness implicitly comments on imperialism and racism. The novella's setting provides the frame for Marlowe's story of his fascination for the prolific ivory trader Kurtz. Conrad draws parallels between London and Africa as places of darkness. Originally issued as a 3-part serial story in Blackwood's magazine to celebrate the 1000th edition of the magazine, Heart of Darkness has been widely republished and translated in many languages. It provided the inspiration for Francis Ford Coppola's 1979 film Apocalypse Now, In 1998, the Modern Library ranked Heart of Darkness 67th on their list of the 100 best novels in English of the 20th century. And this stillness of life did not in the least resemble peace. It was the stillness of an implacable force brooding over an inscrutable intention. It looked at you with a vengeful aspect. Going up that river was like travelling back to the earliest beginnings of the world, when vegetation rioted on the earth and the big trees were kings. An empty stream, a great silence, and impenetrable forest. The air was warm, thick, heavy, sluggish. There was no joy in the brilliance of sunshine. The long stretches of the waterway ran on, deserted, into the gloom of overshadowed distances. On silvery sandbanks, hippos and alligators sunned themselves side by side. The broadening waters flowed through a mob of wooded islands. You lost your way on that river as you would in a desert, and butted all day long against shoals, trying to find the channel, till you thought yourself bewitched and cut off forever from everything you had known once, somewhere, far away in another existence perhaps. There were moments when one's past came back to one, as it will sometimes when you have not a moment to spare to yourself. But it came in the shape of an unrestful and noisy dream, remembered with wonder amongst the overwhelming realities of this strange world of plants and water and silence. Charles Marlowe tells his friends the story of how he became captain of a river steamboat for an ivory trading company. As a child, Marlowe was fascinated by the blank spaces on maps, particularly Africa. The image of a river on the map particularly fascinated Marlowe. In a flashback, Marlowe makes his way to Africa, taking passage on a steamer. He travels 30 miles up the river where his company's station is. Work on a railway is taking place. Marlowe explores a narrow ravine and is horrified to find himself in a place full of critically ill Africans who worked on the railroad and are now dying. Marlowe must wait for 10 days in the company's devastated outer station. Marlowe meets the company's chief accountant, who tells him of a Mr. Kurtz, who is in charge of a very important trading post and is described as a respected first-class agent. The accountant predicts that Kurtz will go far. Marlowe departs with 60 men to travel to the central station, where the steamboat that he will command is based. At the station, he learns that his steamboat has been wrecked in an accident. The general manager informs Marlowe that he could not wait for Marlowe to arrive, and tells him of a rumour that Kurtz is ill. Marlowe fishes his boat out of the river and spends months repairing it. Delayed by the lack of tools and replacement parts, Marlowe is frustrated by the time it takes to perform the repairs. He learns that Kurtz is resented, not admired by the manager. Once underway, the journey to Kurtz's station takes 2 months. Droll thing life is, that mysterious arrangement of merciless logic for a futile purpose. The most you can hope from it is some knowledge of yourself that comes too late, a crop of unextinguishable regrets. I have wrestled with death. It is the most unexciting contest you can imagine. The journey pauses for the night about 8 miles below the inner station. In the morning, the boat is enveloped by a thick fog. The steamboat is later attacked by a barrage of arrows and the helmsman is killed. Marlowe sounds the steam whistle repeatedly, frightening the attackers away. After landing at Kurtz's station, a man boards the steamboat, a Russian wanderer who strayed into Kurtz's camp. Marlowe learns that the natives worship Kurtz and that he has been very ill. The Russian tells of how Kurtz opened his mind and admires Kurtz, even for his power and his willingness to use it. Marlowe suspects that Kurtz has gone mad. Marlowe observes the station and sees a row of posts topped with the severed heads of natives. Around the corner of the house, Kurtz appears with supporters who carry him as a ghost-like figure on a stretcher. The area fills with natives ready for battle, but Kurtz shouts something and they retreat. It takes place in an impalpable greyness, with nothing underfoot, with nothing around, without spectators, without clamour, without glory, without the great desire of victory, without the great fear of defeat, in a sickly atmosphere of tepid skepticism, without much belief in your own right, and still less in that of your adversary. If such is the form of ultimate wisdom, then life is a greater riddle than some of us think it to be. I was within a hair's breadth of the last opportunity for pronouncement, and I found with humiliation that probably I would have nothing to say. His entourage carries Kurtz to the steamer and lays him in a cabin. The manager tells Marlowe that Kurtz has harmed the company's business in the region because his methods are unsound. The Russian reveals that Kurtz believes the company wants to kill him, and Marlowe confirms that hangings were discussed. He struggled with himself too. I saw it. I heard it. I saw the inconceivable mystery of a soul that knew no restraint, no faith, and no fear, yet struggling blindly with itself. After midnight, Kurtz returns to shore. Marlowe finds Kurtz crawling back to the station house. Marlowe threatens to harm Kurtz if he raises an alarm, but Kurtz only laments that he did not accomplish more. The next day they prepare to journey back down the river. Kurtz's health worsens during the trip. The steamboat breaks down, and while stopped for repairs, Kurtz gives Marlowe a packet of papers, including his commissioned report and a photograph, telling him to keep them from the manager. When Marlowe next speaks with him, Kurtz is near death. But his soul was mad. Being alone in the wilderness, it had looked within itself, and by heavens, I tell you, it had gone mad. A short while later, the manager's boy announces to the crew that Kurtz has died. The famous line, "Mr. Kurtz, he dead," would become the epigraph of T.S. Eliot's poem, The Hollow Man. The next day, Marlowe pays little attention to Kurtz's pilgrims as they bury something in a muddy hole. Returning to Europe, Marlowe is embittered and contemptuous of the civilized world. Several callers come to retrieve the papers Kurtz entrusted to him, but Marlowe withholds them or offers papers he knows they have no interest in. He gives Kurtz's report to a journalist for publication if he sees fit. It seems to me I'm trying to tell you a dream, making a vain attempt, because no relation of a dream can convey the dream sensation, that commingling of absurdity, surprise and bewilderment in a tremor of struggling revolt, that notion of being captured by the incredible, which is of the very essence of dreams. No, it is impossible. It is impossible to convey the life sensation of any given epoch of one's existence, that which makes its truth, its meaning, its subtle and penetrating essence. It is impossible. We live, as we dream, alone. Marlowe is left with some personal letters and a photograph of Kurtz's fiancée. When Marlowe visits her, she is deep in mourning, although it has been more than a year since Kurtz's death. She presses Marlowe for information, asking him to repeat Kurtz's final words. Marlowe tells her that Kurtz's final word was her name. They were conquerors, and for that you want only brute force. Nothing to boast of when you have it, since your strength is just an accident arising from the weakness of others. You know I hate, detest, and can't bear a lie. Not because I am straighter than the rest of us, but simply because it appalls me. There is a taint of death, a flavour of mortality in lies, which is exactly what I hate and detest in the world, what I want to forget. And from right to left, along the lighted shore, moved a wild and gorgeous apparition of a woman. She walked with measured steps, draped in striped and fringed cloths, treading the earth proudly with a slight jingle and flash of barbarous ornaments. She carried her head high. Her hair was done in the shape of a helmet. She had brass leggings to the knee, brass wire gauntlets to the elbow, a crimson spot on her tawny cheek, innumerable necklaces of glass beads on her neck, bizarre things, charms, gifts of witch-men that hung about her, glittered and trembled at every step. She must have had the value of several elephant tusks upon her. She was savage and superb, wild-eyed and magnificent. There was something ominous and stately in her deliberate progress, and in the hush that had fallen suddenly upon the whole sorrowful land, the immense wilderness, the colossal body of the fecund and mysterious life seemed to look at her, pensive, as though it had been looking at the image of its own tenebrous and passionate soul. Her face had a tragic and fierce aspect of wild sorrow and of dumb pain mingled with the fear of some struggling, halt-shaped resolve. She stood looking at us without a stir, and like the wilderness itself, with an air of brooding over an inscrutable purpose. A whole minute passed, and then she made a step forward. There was a low jingle, a glint of yellow metal, a sway of fringed draperies, and she stopped as if her heart had failed her. She looked at us all as if her life had depended upon the unswerving steadiness of her glance. I think it had whispered to him things about himself which he did not know, things of which he had no conception till he took counsel with this great solitude, and the whisper had proved irresistibly fascinating. It echoed loudly within him because he was hollow at the core. They trespassed upon my thoughts. They were intruders whose knowledge of life was to me an irritating pretense, because I felt so sure that they could not possibly know the things I knew. Their bearing, which was simply the bearing of commonplace individuals going about their business in the assurance of perfect safety, was offensive to me like the outrageous flauntings of folly in the face of a danger it is unable to comprehend. I had no particular desire to enlighten them, but I had some difficulty in restraining myself from laughing in their faces, so full of stupid importance. Watching a coast as it slips by the ship is like thinking about an enigma. There it is before you, smiling, frowning, inviting, grand, mean, insipid, or savage, and always mute with an air of whispering, "Come and find out." The conquest of the earth, which mostly means the taking it away from those who have a different complexion or slightly flatter noses than ourselves, is not a pretty thing when you look into it too much. What redeems it is the idea only, an idea at the back of it, not a sentimental pretense but an idea, and an unselfish belief in the idea. Something you can set up and bow down before and offer a sacrifice to. I think the knowledge came to him at last, only at the very last, but the wilderness had found him out early and had taken on him a terrible vengeance for the fantastic invasion. I think it had whispered to him things about himself which he did not know, things of which he had no conception till he took counsel with this great solitude, and the whisper had proved irresistibly fascinating. Anything approaching the change that came over his features I have never seen before and hope never to see again. I wasn't touched, I was fascinated. It was as though a veil had been rent. I saw on that ivory face the expression of sombre pride, of ruthless power, of craven terror, of an intense and hopeless despair. Did he live his life again in every detail of desire, temptation, and surrender during that supreme moment of complete knowledge? He cried in a whisper at some image, at some vision. He cried out twice, a cry that was no more than a breath. The horror, the